You're tuned in to Between Two Gongs, where we break open the world of psychospiritual growth, transformation, and healing, powered by J True Mindset Coaching and Centerpiece Healing and Event Center. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Between Two Gongs. I'm here with Ed Collins. Ed is a therapist and author of 3 fabulous books: Warrior to Elder, Fear Itself, and Whispers of the Infinite, Poems and Prose. So today I want to talk specifically about men's work, which this is the best book to dive into, Warrior to Elder. We've been doing a lot of men's work, leading a men's group. And I was just thinking today, right before I came here, how over time, I would say 10, 15 years ago, starting on the psychospiritual path, I was really introduced to a lot of Eastern models. So meditation, emptiness, finding emptiness in everything. And it was great at the time, but there's something that is like this funneling process that is happening where it's like getting more and more articulate and more specific. So the archetypes, Carl Jung's work, has been really speaking to me lately. And so the timing is perfect, of course, as always, with this. And your work with Warrior to Elder. And I'd love for you to just tell me, first of all, how you even came to that.
What drew me to the subject, obviously, is I'm one of these elders. So it is a position that I have learned over the last probably 20 years that we do not recognize, we don't have a place for. And so for me to find a role in my life, I had to consider all of these other factors, had to do some research into how we separated from a path that is shared from most of the knowledge traditions that exist around the world, the wisdom traditions that we see in so many other cultures that we have somehow abandoned in our own culture. It's the position. It is going from being one full of youth and capable and seeing the bright sunshine and charging forward, to someone who must accept a more contemplative life. And the sad thing to me has been that many people don't see that, or they choose to blind themselves to that idea. There are people that I know and that I've worked with that are in their 80s, that are still pursuing active careers, the same career they have worked in their entire life. I might say that somebody could accuse me of this, but my career change has really been to private practice only in the last 3 years. Prior to that, I was working as a school counselor. I've had many jobs, many roles. This is definitively different. This is something that changes it. So the idea of warrior to elder, those that carry the spear, that protect the village, that feed the village, to instead the person who willingly sits outside of their dwelling, greets the people that come by, and shares knowledge, I won't necessarily say wisdom, when asked to.
So going back, I mean, you're a therapist. So from a psychology standpoint, what are some of the angles and details here that like made you want to go from sort of this general psychology therapist base to more specific men's work?
Number one would be that men are finally coming to therapy. That when I started in the field, maybe 20%, probably more 15% of the clients that you would see would be male. There was a stigma. There was in the older generation, John Wayne, a little bit newer, Clint Eastwood. I don't know who the new images might be, but you can pick any one of them from any action movie series you'd see. That was our understanding, that was our perception of manhood. But I was working with people who were aging, who had gotten to the point where that standard no longer could apply to them, and in many ways didn't know what to do. If we go into the physiological part of it, one of the things that we don't often talk about is the idea of male menopause. It's one of those things that simply doesn't come up. It's referred to often as andropause, but you will see evidence of it. And the evidence of it is generally when you have an older person in your life that you have become accustomed to how they behave, and then one day find them weeping at a proverbially a Hallmark commercial, or becoming totally enraptured with an infant or a puppy, all of a sudden there's a softer edge to them that's being presented. Well, seeing that, I was very encouraged. I love to see that. I love to see us accept the fact that no matter what we've pretended to be our whole life, we are always an emotional person. But watching these men struggle against that started to light a light bulb in my head and pushed me into research, which, by the way, absolutely love to research and something I spend so much of my time doing. But in this particular instance, observing people I was working with, observing other people that I know in my own world, and thinking, wow, watching men build walls around themselves as they get older, not letting the world in anymore because they are afraid of showing that emotion that is breaking out of them, that is forcing its way out. Think how many older gentlemen we see that will sit in front of the History Channel all day long. And I'm talking about, well, some as young as in their 60s, but progressively older than that, that will ensconce themselves in front of a television set watching the news all day and become bitter, become separated and distant. My personal belief is that's a fear reaction based on an internal and an external fear. The external fear, obviously, the world appears to be more threatening than it's ever been. Probably not true statistically, but it does appear that way. Internally, now they feel a well of emotion that they've been able to effectively tamp down through their whole lives. But as their testosterone level shifts, as their estrogen level shifts, they don't know what to do with those emotions. So what better way not to deal with emotions than simply not show them, to compress yourself down, to isolate yourself so that you don't have to be tested. So anyway, that's a little bit of a physiological piece of it, but that's kind of what got me going in that direction.
Yeah, this makes me think of, when you're talking about compressed emotion or suppressed emotion sort of cut off, I think of, from the archetypal standpoint, in Robert Moore's work, he's king, warrior, magician, lover. So often, first of all, he says that king is something that we won't even tap into typically until we're 55 and older. So I'm kind of thinking, I'm associating king a little bit with elder in this case. But then he was saying how lover is the thing that ties together and makes the other three human.
Yes.
Because warrior, magician, and king will be very mechanical, very, devoid of heart. That he doesn't say lover is something that comes on later, but it can be deflated at any point in our path. So it seems like something that even the young guys could benefit from tapping into their lover energy. And he also talks about how sometimes a lover energy is inflated, and a young man might be very addiction prone and very grabby at love or at relationships and stage 5 clinger type. And that is I believe the inflated lover.
Well, one of the other contextual clues can be that I work with both men and women, and I have worked with men and women who have had sex addictions. And the percentage of men versus the percentage of women who present with that particular ailment is far skewed. It is predominantly a male affliction. It comes from a fascination with pornography, but that is a mechanical type of function to display that lover side without any personal commitment or connection to it. So it becomes this artifice, this artificial world that they're able to construct, still keeping them removed. They can still be that stoic person, but the reality of it is that's not who they are.
That's interesting. Yeah, so now that mechanizes the lover.
Good word for that, by the way. I like that.
It keeps the lover just this mechanical, like it's operating, but very skewed.
I would guess, although I don't have statistics to back it up, that with the advent of the AI-assisted robotic sex companions, the market is not female. That the market, it will be specifically male. Again, coming to that mechanized concept of it. Can we so tamp down our emotional set as men that we are performative when we are engaged with a woman? Or I would venture to say with another man, that we are performative, that we're calculating this in our heads. Where now, if you're replacing with an automaton, it becomes even more. But how do you open that? How do you open that up and say, I am a whole person, I have deep emotions, I need not fear my emotions. You know, that's another interesting component to the aging male. One of the things that you will never hear come up in conversation, as far as I have been able to see, when you talk about aging men, we don't talk about fear. That the fear of loss of self, or our image of self, will deteriorate. On the other hand, we often see aging men doing absolutely everything within their power to appear younger than they are. That it's a huge industry that is fed from every direction possible. Instead of just accepting life as it is and keeping yourself healthy, we become fascinated with this idea of immortality when we know that that's not possible.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, because on the surface, you might think that that's something that's primarily in the world of women who are mainly trying to preserve that youth. But really, it is also present in men as well.
Oh, tremendously. It shows different, though.
Yeah.
Not that men don't use cosmetics, but in most cases you don't see them using it. It's not presented. So we're still, and I'm not calling it vanity. Vanity, I think, is something different. Vanity is expressing yourself to the outside world. I think part of this is expressing yourself to the interior world. I think a lot of why we do it is because we want to look in that mirror and see something other than what we know we actually are. But that goes back to the stages, that goes back to those steps, that we don't have that clearly defined path. If you look at tribal societies in Africa and look at the society, how the structure is built, with the definitive roles that exist in each one of the tribes, and I am talking about not the modern tribes, but the more primitive tribes that still exist, that you can see that structure in place. There is a role for each stage of your life. There's an expectation for each stage of your life, women and men. But yet when that transfers to our culture, the role is lost.
Yeah, it gets lumped together in sort of one lifelong role.
And so you're assigning a value to yourself that's ascribed by something artificial, saying that your only value in life is to be the earner, to be the worker, to be the warrior. That's wrong. That's not why your grandchildren climb on your lap.
Right.
Not because you're carrying a spear. How many times have we run into a situation with aging men where their grandchildren fear them? There's this sense of distance. There's this sense of isolation. Thank goodness it's not as much as it once was. In observation, certainly, I don't see that as much anymore, but that was huge. That was a big, big piece of this development. And it's always been wrong.
Do you mean fear in terms of anger outbursts or something like that? He seems like Grandpa seems unsafe to be around.
Grandpa seems unsafe, and I'm not talking in a sexual way at all. I'm talking about just when you go to approach them, they're cold, they're distant, they rebuff you. And now I've seen that change quite a bit. I've seen grandfathers more engaging with their grandkids. But I think that gives them an outlet. I think that particular relationship has opened a door for them to be able to expose their emotions in a safe way, in a societally recognized form. If you can do that for a young child in your life, if you can do that for a puppy, if you can have a dog or a cat that you're totally attached to, and you're allowed to display that set of emotions when you're in proximity to these people, these creatures, why is that different with everyone else? Why can't I show that I feel deeply when I'm having a conversation with you? Why would that be forbidden in our culture.
To express emotion. Yeah, it's quite an epidemic. It's like a parasite of sorts that just grabbed onto a lot of us men. I mean, I would say all of the men I knew growing up, my elders and what I'll actually say olders, because I've recently heard, there's a big difference between an older and an elder.
Yes.
Elder carries wisdom and knowledge. This makes me think while you were speaking too, just that in relation to this, something along the lines of like if, specific layers of trauma, whatever it is that were unprocessed as say a 7-year-old boy, that particular human will not progress in that specific way, whatever that emotion triggered or cut off something. And they can be 70 years old and still have the same triggers when XYZ happens in their life and have no idea that they're just, having these moments of outbursts because some random thing happened.
Obviously, working in therapy, I work a lot with memory. I work a lot with taking people back to some of those origin moments where these emotional experiences have happened. I can think of one, for example, just anecdotally, is I have worked with a person that worked in or was in the military during Vietnam, and very, very stoic presentation in all conversations we have. However, the second we go into specific details about what they did way back in Vietnam, they melt. They crumble. It's because there is an emotional tie that they have never been able to sever from that moment to the present moment. And we have to accept the fact that memories are wonderful. However, memories carry an emotional content that moves forward with us, which is displaced in our current world. Think about this. If you had a favorite pet when you were 7 years old, and that pet died in somewhat of a tragic occurrence, would you then view every pet you have with the potential of an emotional liability? Can you not do that? Can you hold yourself from doing that? So as that progresses through your life, maybe it stays focused on a pet. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you begin to calcify. Maybe you begin to build up barriers, defensive positions against letting anything else have access to you at a point that would make you emotionally vulnerable.
Right back to the lover, the wounded lover.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
exactly.
The wounded lover archetype affecting life. And it's like we're running from feeling.
Yes, because we've been programmed to in this culture. But I think of other cultures. I think of the Asian culture in particular that reveres, honors, respects their elders. I think of the Native American culture, which has always revered the aunties, whoever in that structure exists, and it's a natural, free-flowing event to go from the warrior. There's not some tragic experience. I think of the show Succession on TV. I don't think anything shows that in modern culture better than that particular show, because it's nothing but one older man trying to hold on to everything he's got and being absolutely horrid to everyone around him. And yet those people below him, because he has suppressed this, never getting a chance to evolve to that position because he keeps slashing him, pushing him down. How often does that happen? How often do we have positions of ascendancy that we restrict people from accessing because we have an older person who is sitting in that archetypal position, that liege lord at the top of the hill? Do they still deserve to be there? Do they still earn that right to sit there? Doesn't matter. They're given power, but that power is a perception. That power is a perception based on what they earn, what they do, that piece that's come up with them. But there's no transition to let that go. They don't know how to let that go. And again, this comes back to that fear center. there are other people that sit in those type of very, very wealthy positions, very controlling, that don't allow someone to take part of that power, to groom them, to grow them, to experience what that's going to be. So what happens to that next generation coming up? They become embittered. They want to fight. They want to push to gain that position of power. So we've set this artificial structure up that is nothing like real life. In a pride of lions, there is a succession. Of course, there's a lot of in-battling between the lions that are of similar age, but then when a lion reaches a certain age, he's challenged for his position in the pride. Now, he has to accept the loss to a younger, stronger, more powerful lion. When he does, he's still part of the pride. He still has a role to fill. Mm-hmm. He's not abandoned. He's not put on the proverbial ice floe to float off into the sea. But instead, there's a vital role that he still fills. We ignore that in our culture.
Yeah, we need, on a few different levels, ceremonial rites of passage. Mm-hmm. Not only as, in the men's work we do, we talk a lot about that, the needed ceremonial rite of passage from boy to man. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like there's another layer, that needs to happen later as well. And becoming, going from warrior to elder. Mm-hmm. And you're right, in this culture, we're missing both sides of that.
Yep. And I understand that some of the reaction is because of the performative nature of old men who intentionally distance themselves, circling back again to that fear model. They don't want to know anything. Not that it's a male piece, but I have to tell you one of the saddest things that my mother told me before she passed away. And my mother was brilliant. My mother was very well read, exposed herself to everything. But she told me that she was tired of learning new things. She didn't want to learn anything new anymore. And in many ways, it kind of broke my heart. But it's not just her. I see that same modus in many men, many aging men. And when I say aging, I'm not necessarily talking about my age, and I'm going to be 71 in October. So it's not that. It's something different. They see it coming, and it's this avoidance technique to become more of the thing that you were perceived as being and bringing that into your future when it's not even practical. I can't run a 100-yard dash. I'm not going to go to the bar and pick up a whole bunch of beautiful women. That's not going to happen at my stage in life. Those things that were iconically fashioned to describe what a successful, powerful man were are no longer applicable in our world. Mm-hmm. In that world, in my world, they certainly are not. Okay.
I think that even opens up the question of what those things, those particular, what you said, fashioned layers or achievements, how many of those were wounded to start with, back then, and how we perceived what a successful man looks like, and you said, going to the bar, picking up women, or maybe driving a Ferrari or whatever. No. Layers were perceived as the thing. How many of those would be best to just grow out of, even in the stage of the warrior in the younger years? And
begin to accept the fact that at some point in your life there is a transition coming. I think that's key. Mm-hmm. I think that's very good to understand this. That's why I'm happy to see this book getting in the hands of some younger men. I've got some 25-year-old guys that have read it and gone, at first I thought it was about my father, and now I recognize the fact that it's about me. Mm-hmm. Because if you know what the future holds for you, then you can start to chart a path that makes that smooth. You can be successful at aging. But if you don't accept the fact that that change is coming, it's going to hit you in the head. It's undeniable.
Yeah, and it's almost like on another level, what is age in terms of number? One could become an elder in their 40s or something like that if the time is right, and I'm a firm believer of past lives, and sometimes the ripening is there. I think if we're aware of this from a young age, then we can start to grow into this even earlier and earlier and become elders, wise humans, even in our younger years.
And if we're willing to allow ourselves to open up to it, you talked about my good reading buddy Carl Jung, and one of the things that he talks about is some of this transitional piece, but centered on the idea of this collective unconscious, this thing that floats above us all that if we allow ourselves to, we can tap into. Well, we've heard it called many things, the wisdom of the ages. I mean, there's so many different euphemisms that have been used for this. But in this instance, to me, I think as we start to approach it, 40 years old, 45, 35 maybe, if we can tap into some of that, we get that feel, we get that synchronicity of thought. We start to be able to understand that we may not contain wisdom, but we have accrued knowledge. And through knowledge, you can build a path to wisdom.
I'm gonna have to write that down. So it's really easy to see where the problem is in our culture. It's easy to name. How do we start moving towards the solution side of this thing?
Of course, the first step is always going to be an understanding. We've talked a bit about that transition, recognizing that you cannot continue this on. But what do you do? Hobbies. Many people will say that when I retire, I want to explore a hobby. We have to understand the mechanics of what a hobby is. It's a distraction from your life. It is something you find pleasing, but it is not your life. So to successfully move into a position of an elder requires something that has deep, reciprocating response, that it is echoing inside of you. If you work in a field that you truly love and you have spent your whole life working in this field, it at some level is not about the money. It at some level becomes about this feeling that it gives you to be successful in what you do. So how does that then translate to becoming an older adult in our society? I think the translation is by shifting lanes. If you think that your retirement will be, perhaps I used to be a banker and I'm going to write a series of books about banking as my retirement. Have you indeed shifted lanes?
Right.
No, you're in that same track. However, if as a banker, when I retire, I choose to start going into inner city environments and educating poverty-bound children on how they can improve their life by making small investments, by changing certain things, by maybe delaying gratification on some of the things they may want so they can start to build some financial resources. That is an effective use of a transition from the warrior to the elder. That was an easy one. There's so many of them that exist. You can think of it in any different way, and it doesn't even have to be directly related like that. There are
Shout out
people-
to the bankers. I mean,
Yeah.
great wisdom for the bankers out there.
There's a transitional piece that comes to mind too. If you have always worked in a somewhat insulated environment, if you have been in, for instance, insurance, accounting, those type of things that are somewhat of a single desk, single focus mechanism, when you retire, would it be interesting to explore something deeper? Would it be interesting to explore perhaps becoming involved in a local charity, becoming involved in some volunteering operation? In and of itself, I am not sure that that volunteering operation satisfies the elder position, but it becomes experiential. You're now applying your knowledge to a specific point in the future. Can you grow wisdom and through that then begin to backfeed with your knowledge into those people that you're working with? The other prototypical symbol that I always remember is you have the old man. I get to call him that because I am one. You get the old man who sits on the front porch telling everybody else what they're doing wrong in their life and what they should be doing right. That's not at all the target.
Yeah. Right.
That is off-putting, it's insulting, and it is, in large part of the reason we're at this place that we're at right now. That we have that trope. We have that image in our mind. So instead, my vision is, I want to sit on my front porch and I want to watch the world. and I want to be in the world, and I want to absorb the world. And if someone comes to me and says, can you help me with this? Then I consider it, and if I have something of value to share with them, I share it.
I love that. Engaging the lover archetype and bringing that into life, but having a deeper love for life itself. And also, I hear a lot of embodiment in that. So we're taking it from this like conceptual, heady stuff, which most of us men are head-centered, you know, for intellectual. You know, we can intellectualize things and we have purpose-driven motives, but to become an elder, to engage in this wisdom, involves bringing a love for life and becoming embodied and being so present that you can, as you say, watch life happen.
Well, if I can share another anecdote from my own life, I would tell you, looking back, can very much recall my father, who was always the Banty Irishman. He was always that hard drinking, hard smoking, hard working, that guy. Very charismatic, everybody loved him. But he was never one that felt comfortable to approach. There was always that edge. But then I watched something transition through the years, starting with animals. I don't know why this transition happened, but I can almost recall the day that it happened. I must have been 19 years old, and I brought home a boa constrictor. And my father would play with this snake. And the snake was not party to this. It just would bite him occasionally. And he would be in the kitchen bleeding from a bite in his hand and just still holding the snake and still being affectionate towards a snake. Wow. I said, okay. Well, I watched that transition through the years where it then expanded to animals in general. I basically am very surprised looking back that he didn't decide to become a vegan, which would have been absolutely, totally out of his character. But because his affection for animals was so high that he actually displayed physical pain, witnessing any pain that was given to an animal. Well, I didn't recognize it at the time. In fact, there were times that I argued with him that he cared more for animals than he did for other human beings. And I can remember those arguments. But now looking back at it, I think I was looking at something entirely different than I thought I was looking at. I think I was looking at him struggling with this same process, finding those venues where it is allowable to let the lover mentality invest into your future.
And to people.
Yeah, and transferring it. Don't get me wrong, I love my animals, but can we take that same mentality and instead of placing it on a baby, place it on a troubled teen? Place it on someone who is struggling. Place it on someone who is displaced in our society and has no place to go. Can I feel compassion for that person? Can I stop any type of preconceived judgment of that person? Can I work my way through that swamp, and come out the other side of it and say, that's a living, breathing human being that deserves my respect regardless of the circumstances. So I think that's been an awakening for me to look back in reflection. My father's been gone for quite some time now, but again, sorry, Dad, I think I got it all wrong.
You know, this makes me think of this video I saw of a rescue cat. It was a little kitten that they put in a cage or in one of those cubbies next to another cat that was like an older cat. And every time the older cat would go to sort of try to greet this cat, the little one would claw, would fight, would hiss, and it did this for a while. And then eventually, but the older cat would stay calm. Wouldn't fight back, wouldn't hiss back, would just sort of hold space. You know, this wisdom of this older cat. And eventually the little kitten would soften and soften and soften slowly over time. And next thing you know, like they're just, together and cuddling up and all of this. And that's the ultimate trial, is like, how do you approach someone who is very wounded, who may speak very badly of you, who may lash out, who may physically try to harm you, but you can see past that and you can see the little child inside just like suffering crying for help, really, but hiding behind this mask.
Granted, I have a slightly different seat to view this than a lot of the people do because of what my profession is, but I can see that wounded child experience and that transition happen in different ways, and I can see the people that resist it. And opening yourself up to allow for the fallibility of other people is difficult. We process men, as you said, in a very linear fashion. I believe, I'm a big believer in genetically encoded memory. I think that there is too much evidence to support the fact that many of our behaviors come from much, much, much more ancient times, moving us forward into how we are now. So how did that inform us? Well, there was a time that your value to the tribe diminished to the point that you, again, sat outside your tent. But how did that transfer happen? How did that ease of movement happen as we move through it? And I think that's coded in us, that spear-carrying warrior, hence why I chose that title, that there's a time that we had to be target-focused. We had to be zeroed in on what we did. The female component of that were the ones who built the home. They're the ones who ensured that there was a safe growth place for the children, that their job was family, the men's job was protection, defense, gathering food. That was their job. Well, I think that's still kind of encoded in us in a certain way. That's why men tend to think in a linear fashion. I tell it almost in a funny way when I do couples work, is that we are barely the same species. We have different skeletons, we have different internal organs, our blood has keynotes that are different, our hair is different. Why do we think our brains aren't different? And all of that was genetically modified through the ages to get us to where we are. So that genetic modification was before we recognized what that was. We live in a world now, we can clearly identify what these traits are. That men will listen to the first sentence or two that a woman tells them, and they will be coming up with internal solutions for all the problems she may have described, without ever once considering the fact she never asked you to solve a thing.
This is David Data 101, like David Data's work. This is a great reminder to go listen to that book a few more times. But yeah, that dance between the masculine and the feminine. The word generativity is coming to mind, and I'm thinking about Robert Moore's work. And he talks about, as we start to move into the king seat, and in your case, the elder, I'm kind of making those synonymous a little bit because it feels that way.
There may be a slight difference between the two, though, and I think it is in the wording. When you say king, it automatically describes someone in a position of power and strength in an elevated position. When I say elder, I don't envision it that way. You are simply a functional part of the tribe. That your role is not as the titular leader, it is not that construct. It's something else. Perhaps a wise advisor, more so than any type of leader. That's where I do believe part of our society gets it wrong, because we skip over that particular thing and insist on that king role. And I know that's slightly different from what Moore talks about as king. I know that there's another construct to it, but I think it's the vocabulary of it that is a little different.
So yeah, even maybe some cross between, or maybe leaning more towards magician, like the elder magician.
Yes.
Having that role, because a magician is also synonymous with like shaman or wise elder.
There's definitely a shamanistic element to this. There definitely is. Most men would probably look at the word shaman and would be mystified by it in and of itself, not understanding it. But you know, and I know you've done extensive work with it as well, what a shaman truly represents to the tribe is exactly that. Regardless of age, you are the elder. You are that person who is a repository of tribal knowledge. Again, I try to avoid the word wisdom because sometimes that doesn't follow through. But you're at least that. You're at least that person who contains the knowledge of the past and, when called on, can help guide people if they choose to. We all know that one of our greatest societal illnesses that we have, and have had for a very long time, is we pay no attention to the past. We instead believe that we somehow have the ability to recreate everything on the spot and it will be better than it was without ever checking to see what it was. Most of our failures have been, over and over again, the same mechanical thing. Where now, is that the way we have to be? Is that a path we have to follow? I don't believe that it is. I think we can learn from our past, but you'll never do that unless you know someone who knows the past.
Yeah, I think of playing that role is like being what do they say, a hollow bone, so that you don't have the guru syndrome, so to speak, of like wanting to be the guru, wanting to be the teacher, and therefore deriving some sort of pleasure out of that, or like complex, feeding some complex of like, oh, I'd love to be that, but rather it's more of a giving, a generativity.
And maybe too, that would be a slight division between the concept of king. In most cases, those who succeed in becoming a king have charted a path to become so. It's not been delivered to them. It's not something that was given to them because of other causation. Instead, it was something they tried to attain. I don't know that being a tribal elder is something that you functionally seek out.
Yeah, from what I remember hearing one of my teachers, my shamanic teachers, was saying, is like most of them did not want to be the shaman. If they were, granted that role, it wasn't something that they were necessarily looking forward to. And that the shamans really kind of stayed on the outskirts of the town or of the tribe, and it was someone you went to when you were sick and had a problem, and so they didn't really want to have to deal with that.
But think about the mechanics of that. If you're a warrior, if you are going through your life as a warrior, do you want to set the spear down? Is there a part of you that calls to this transition? Do you actually see yourself as the model that you're envisioning yourself transitioning into what you will ultimately become, whether you want to or not, but transitioning into this other piece? Instead, do you do then everything you can to hold on to this artificial idea of who you are, when you know that it's not true? You know that it's not possible. So I think part of that, in fact, becomes that friction. Part of that becomes that dynamic. I would say the father-son dynamic, because very often you see it apply that way. I mean, that's probably our most immediate vision of this whole thing. Young men often challenge their father, whether they do it verbally, physically, through their work, whatever they do. There is a sense of competition. And I do think that that's healthy, and I do think at a certain level that's natural, but then it can take a dark turn. It can become something else. And mostly, I believe, is because that friction is not understood and shared. If you understand that this is a necessary, important role, I often will tell people when they're struggling with teenagers that I ask them if they've ever seen a bird hatched from an egg. And of course, they look at me like I'm crazy. Some people have, some people haven't. But if you have ever witnessed a baby bird breaking its way out of an egg, they pop out all cute and fluffy and chirping, don't they? Oh, they do not. They look horrible. They're exhausted. They're nasty looking. It is extreme physical labor. But the conception is very easy. If they don't break out of that egg, they die. They will never thrive. We know as the observer, we know as the parents of that egg, that if they don't succeed in breaking from that shell, they'll never stand on the edge of the nest, they will never fly. So it's an important part that we all do, that breaking loose from it.
when I think of you were saying something about the father-son dynamic, what comes to mind is, the father not being able to let go of that hierarchy and to allow the son to rise to his level and to meet him in this, what Malidoma calls, spotlighting, to be able to say, good job. I mean, how many men in my men's group have never heard their father figure say, good job, you're killing it, you're doing great, that supporting role. And you said something along the lines of competition, and how often is that competition still laying in the undercurrent of that relationship and sort of driving both sides of this?
And the acknowledgement of who you are as an adult human being, male in our society, can be highlighted, spotlighted to you by your father simply by him saying, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you? How difficult is that to say? How difficult is it to say, even if it is for something that maybe the father doesn't really understand? If I have a son who's working in the tech world and he's designing some new module for AI or some new assistant that's out there, I don't understand what he does. But does that keep me from saying, you're being successful, I'm proud of you, you're changing our world? What does that cost? But yet, you're right, very, very infrequent. Yeah,
I feel like that is the medicine that the men's work, a huge part of the men's work is bringing through, is spotlighting one another. I think Malidoma nailed it on the head with that. Because that is the majority of, I think, what causes some of these inflation and deflation mechanisms within these archetypes is just not being seen.
Well, and even exploring the possibility that in groups of men, can we alternate our roles? Can we be the surrogate father? Can we be the surrogate son? Can we then exchange information, accepting it free-flowing back and forth, that will elevate both of us? Can we bring to some young man who has never been told he's been loved by his father, never been told that his father's proud of him, maybe never met his father? Can another man step into that role and fill that spot? I believe that the answer is yes. I fundamentally believe the answer is yes. But it requires a certain level of acceptance on both of the players in that particular drama. But can it be done? I certainly hope so.
And that's what we do. I mean, that's exactly what we do in the men's group, is just showing up for one another from a place of, I see you, great job. Like that's the thing that I push all the time. It's like, because I've always wanted that as well, you know, as a young man. And so here we are. Yeah, this is what it is to become an elder. Is to find a way to usher in the ones behind us.
I'll tell you the one cheesy statement that I generally work into most clients that I talk to. If you've ever been asked in your life what the true meaning of life is, I think I know it. I think I know it just like the plants, the birds, the squirrels, the amoebas, everything on the planet knows it. The true meaning in life is to propel the generation that follows you to reach higher satisfaction in their life. I don't think there's any greater meaning in life than to do that. That doesn't imply that you have to have children of your own. In fact, if you do have children of your own, I don't think that's the end set on this. I think it's a broader scope. I think it's finding ways to make sure that our species survives through the next generations. And not just survives, but improves. And I can't think of any truer meaning of life.
The way I've seen this manifesting itself in all of the men's work and the men's circles that we've done is stewardship. And I think that it gives purpose. You know, it's like Viktor Frankl's whole angle on like purpose and how important purpose is. And as men get older, as people get older, It's purpose that keeps them in the game. And what better purpose than to steward the younger generation and to have that sense of like, oh, my story mattered so much that it's going to help this person because I resonate specifically with their story and they're hearing me speak on something that happened to me 30 years ago, and this is how I worked through it, and what a beautiful thing.
We can foster that. We can generate that. We can walk into a world without assuming things, without assuming gender bias, without assuming racial bias, without assuming any of these biases that we know are built up, that we were infected with from an early age. We don't have to take that. We simply don't have to take that.
Yeah, amen.
If you're in a community that has a senior center, for instance, and there are a lot of vital senior centers, a lot of times older men repel from that and have to be drawn in with enticements, like for instance, oh, they play euchre on Thursdays, you might like that, or they shoot pool. But that's a collective group of older men who could then go to share their experiences in a meaningful way with younger people. And there are some that have done beautiful work with this, where they go in and read in kindergarten. They go in and read, or they go in and talk about their life experiences in elementary school. So for those children who are not able to have actual grandparents in their lives, they get a different understanding of what this is. They get a different look. Schools love this idea. For those people who are not necessarily drawn or somehow feel uncomfortable doing it with children, many animal shelters have volunteers that come in and sit and read to the animals. There's so much you can do to get out of your own life. I often challenge people, older people, younger people alike. I'll ask them, what shoe do you put on first every morning? And they'll tell me, and I'll tell them, tomorrow morning, put on the opposite shoe. We need to learn to accept certain levels of discomfort. Putting the opposite shoe on doesn't seem like it'd be uncomfortable, but there is this little tinge to it. There's this little piece. And then I always throw at them, if you do that successfully the next day, brush your teeth with the opposite hand, and I am not responsible for that. But challenging ourselves to do something that pushes us just slightly out of our comfort zone. If we push too much, we recoil. But as an older man, I try as best I can to push my comfort zone. I will experiment with new music. I will experiment with new reading. I will experiment with new, situations, new food. It doesn't matter. I have learned not to be afraid of simple changes. Let's see, I was 67 when I jumped out of an airplane for the first time.
Whoa, okay.
So,
hey.
And I loved it. If it wasn't so much money, I'd do it more.
Wow. Yeah, one of my teachers said, breaking the social moray, right? So the social moray is like this pattern or the automatic thing that we do, falling into this sense of complacency, doing the same things over and over and over. But yeah, I can see that being a huge benefit of just constantly put the other shoe on.
And it doesn't matter what you choose to do. You want to try being an artist, try being an artist. You want to try singing, go to a karaoke bar. No one cares. We will judge ourselves 100 times more harshly than any external view. It's what we do. We get in our heads and we tell ourselves a false narrative. And again, tying back into the elder thing, I think it amplifies as we get older because we have practiced this through our whole lives. And now we have the opportunity to break that mold. We're not going to break it. We're terrified of breaking that mold. And for men, you don't want to talk about fear. Fear is a taboo subject, right? That's not true. It simply isn't true. We fear.
Yeah, and I think there is that protection mechanism though that wants to say that I'm not afraid, even though I am. And that, so basically being afraid of vulnerability. I think of what's coming to mind now is, I don't remember who was talking about this, but they were saying that women typically are in their feminine in their early years, and as they age, they start to engage more into their masculine energy, and then vice versa for the men. The men are in their sort of warrior masculine energy, and then as they age, there's this desire or something in them that wants to explore more of that feminine, of like becoming a musician, becoming a poet, writing, and just engaging more in the arts in that way.
Absolutely fascinating subject. The transition of women from being that feminine image that is originally held, transitioning up to this different image. We talked a little bit about how the males resist the change, how we calcify, how we try not to allow that emotionalization to happen. What I find working with women, it's just the opposite. They embrace it, because that role that they were perceived as having as young was in large part weak and helpless and defenseless and needing protection. As they mature through their lives, they shrug off that role. They realize largely they don't have to be this. If there is a number one reason that I am presented when I'm working with couples who are pursuing perhaps a divorce, separation, whatever, it is that dissatisfaction in life that a woman experiences 15, 20, 25 years into a relationship and doesn't feel they have been given any power. Doesn't feel like they've truly been given a choice to find out who they are. Instead, being forced into a model, not just by society, but by their spouse. So there's some real disconnection, real empowering things that have to happen for women. It's this idea of equality. No, I'm sorry, we're not equal, but we are equally good. We are equally powerful. We are equally important. And we have to learn that transition as men. We have to accept that.
Yeah, we're all unique, like a fingerprint. But there's these interesting archetypal things like that. And so just kind of spinning off of what you're saying is that the feminine are sort of happy to drop that and step into this new role, but the men resist, and it makes sense, because from that masculine perspective of, stay hard, like that mentality, to drop that and to become a poet, and to, even if there's something itching in you to want to engage in that, I can see the mind, the ego, just not being willing to entertain that whatsoever.
And I think there's another small piece to this that kind of sums up some of it. I'm a carpenter, I pound nails into wood. This is what I do. In that, what room do I have to explore an emotional aspect? Our view of our lives as men, as we age, is performative. We are known for the performance that we do. We are known for our output. I don't believe that that's the same for women. It can be within job spheres. I understand that's different, but I'm talking about in a grander scheme of things, that we conceptualize our life as having to produce a product that other people can admire, use. It can be functional. But I think that's where the translation gets lost. That what do we do after that? And again, coming full circle back to the idea of dropping the spear. What do we do when that production is no longer valid? That production no longer can define us. Who are we? What do we do?
Yeah, so it sounds like you're really putting an emphasis on how much value there is in becoming this, whether that's poetry or whether that's finding whatever your last season of life, so to speak, one of your later seasons of life is, that there's so much value in that to sort of rebirth and step into this new role.
There's evidence of many people out there who have not done the big thing that they are known for in the world until they were older.
Yeah. In fact, I think so many of the most successful people that we know started much later and became, say, an actor and actress in their 70s, 80s.
Well, I think too, you look at that progress and that path, that of all of these people that have accomplished things in their later ages, can you think of anyone who accomplished something that was building a big financial network, the structural things that before that would have gained them notoriety and fame, but at a certain point, those things that they accomplish are in the artistic realm. Poetry, art, drama, any of those things, even music to a certain extent, becomes birthed in this new elder role.
All right, so you've definitely given us a lot of knowledge and wisdom to chew on. Yeah. So any other last words to tie this all together?
I think it's got to be a reciprocal arrangement between the young people and the older people to allow for this growth, to allow us to understand the changing of the roles, to encourage both the young and the old, to know that this is a meaningful and very, very deeply important part of our development, how we can change our culture simply by accepting this. There's another piece to it too, I think, that comes in to the idea of approaching it fearlessly. We know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we have a limited time on this earth. Everyone is aware of this. In fact, I heard a kind of an interesting way of phrasing it by saying that mother's milk is a terminal addiction. Everyone who has ever tasted mother's milk ultimately will die. There's no doubt. So the concept is simple. If that's what this is, how can we elevate the next generation to have an easier path? Not that we want to provide comfort. Ease and comfort are two different things. If we can create a clearer path, something that somebody else can trod, why not? What does it harm us? How does it hurt us? We have to put aside that sense of competition, because I've gained a certain status through my life and through my career and through my education and whatever else it happens to be. Why can't I be the proverbial finger pointing at the moon? The concept of let's embrace this together and let's move forward together. Let's know what the roles are that we play, but not in these concrete set roles that society wants to enforce on us, but instead the natural role, the role that we fulfill in our lives as we age.
Beautifully said. Thank you for all of that.
My pleasure.
For those of you out there who are interested in any of Ed's books, I'll put the link down below. You can buy them online. Thank you so much, Ed. Much appreciated.
Certainly.
Gratitude.
Gratitude right back.
Thanks for joining us on Between Two Gongs. Keep walking your path of growth and healing, and remember, you're not alone on your journey. This has been brought to you by J True Mindset Coaching and Centerpiece Healing and Event Center. Until next time, be well.